कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी करती हैं मुलाकातें, कभी यादों में बरसातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें। मन की गहरी झील में कूद जाती हैं कभी, सोच के दरिया के संग संग बहती जाती हैं कभी। चाहे शाम हो या हो रातें, किताबें करती हैं बातें।
On our program today, we have a poet, writer and translator. But this doesn't really describe her, because with her words, she weaves these mesmeric images that take you into other worlds and other timescapes. We are delighted to have on our program Priya Sarukai Chhabria. Priya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I'm delighted to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And let's talk about your fifth book, which also is very different from the other books you've written. Bombay, Mumbai, Immersions.
Yes, indeed, it is very different. I think all my books are rather different from each other. I mean, one is a speculative fiction novel. The other is, for lack of a better word, a postmodern novel. I have two poetry collections which are different, quite different in themselves. And this is a book of literary essays, which is part memoir, part travelogue, part history.
This has a story of its own, how you collaborated, how you got together.
Yes, actually it's crosses continents. Christopher Taylor was working, he's an art photographer who lives in the south of France and works between Iceland and China. He was working in India, actually in Bombay, and he had done a book for my publishers. And when Mr. Neogi proposed they do a book on Bombay, he does a book on Bombay, he thought about it and decided, yes, if I find a good collaborator, I shall. But as he was flying back from India, he stopped in Paris for a night with his friends and talked about this idea. The friend happened to have one of my poetry books, gave it to him. Christopher read it.
Was it not springtime yet?
Yes, indeed. It was not springtime yet, my second poetry collection. And Christopher read it and got in touch with me. And when I saw his photographs, I was absolutely, shall I say, mesmerized for the tone and the texture, the play of light on them. But most of all, I think, a marvelous quality of stillness, of meditation, you know, which is there. And this moved me. And I thought, yes, one can work with this person. But then, of course, you know how it is, artists can meet as, you know, on the page, but when you actually meet in life, it might be another thing. So with great trepidation, both of us met in London to decide whether we could work with each other or not. And as it happened, I mean, the more fabulous, shall I say, the ideas, or fantastic the ideas I threw out, Christopher was game for it all. So I said, acha chalo, theek hai, we can work together. And that is how we went to Mr. Neogi and said, yes, now we're a team, we're taking this on. And I must say, Mr. Neogi was very nice about it. All he said was, you know, really focus on the common people and left the rest to us. So we worked in this kind of roomy comfort without the restrictions of, you know, look at this, so look at that. And the book developed in a sense like a novel. I mean, as we went along, we developed it.
The city that you live in, especially a city like Bombay, which is so complex and has so many layers, one tends to be kind of immured. One tends not to notice Bombay of the bylanes. So was it something that you kind of thought about before when you were there?
You know, when you live in a city, very often you don't know very much of it. You are moving in your little areas. But when you're going to write a book, it has to be a discovery. You're rediscovering everything new. And especially the parts that you've, say, heard about, I have vague recollections. Like, for instance, for me, the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, that I had been to with my parents in childhood and never again visited.
Or the Canary Caves.
Oh yes, absolutely. So one knew one wanted to go there again as an adult, writing a book and see what it offers this time. So many of the discoveries were like that.
Yes, but also certain aspects, like say the Chinatown that you talk about. I'm pretty sure that that wasn't a part of your growing up memory, was it?
True, Mazagon and the Chinese temple, those areas, you're very right, that was not part of my childhood memory. But I had heard about it and had visited it once with some friends of mine, particularly the city historian Rafiq Baghdadi. And I'd had this glimpse of it years ago and I knew I wanted to get back. So it was a variety of things that pulled me to certain areas. Some childhood memories, some inquisitiveness. Sometimes Christopher would say, I found this marvelous building. And, you know, we'd set off to discover more of it.
The experience of the reader when you read the text is like reading a book in Braille. It's
oh, how wonderful!
It's so tactile. You know, it's almost like a sensual experience. All the words, the descriptions, the way you've described the tides, for example. And yet, the photographs, although they are complementary, you know, there is, as you yourself said, they are more meditative. There's a stillness to them. There is a gritty quality, but yet there is a stillness. So this marriage of the dynamism in the words and actually finding the stillness in what is really moving. Isn't that amazing? Was that planned or what happened?
I think what happened was, at that time, we hadn't elaborated or talked too much about how we would do the book, but certainly we wanted it to be a slow unfolding, a thoughtful process, because frankly I think one needs to take in an experience and stay with it a long time before putting it out again. And I think when you are handling or looking at a city which is as in many ways troubling and problematic as Bombay, you need to have time to think about it in solitude. So this definitely happened, thinking about it in solitude. And you know what happens when you think about things in solitude? You tend to get more reflective. And in terms of language and sentence construction, this would become normally longer sentences with clauses and pauses.
More languid, almost cat-like, feline in its quality.
Thank you. It would have a kind of a stretch to it, and I think this also was there in this quality of looking, maybe of reflection. I think is there in Christopher's work as well. So I think what we did was his reflective gaze and me reflecting on the experiences led to this kind of tone. Also, I think there's one other thing which shaped the tone, which you call poetic. I wanted to pay tribute, as I said, to the city. I think it's fantastic that it still survives in whichever way it does. And when you pay tribute, I think it's almost natural that you use the raised speech of prayer, of poetry, you know. And most of the people I know I'm praising are migrants, are those whose body is their home, their bed, because Bombay as a city is kind to these people, those without a home, who come in from the hinterland.
In fact, that's what you've also mentioned in your book, that Bombay is the kindest to the poorest.
Yes, yes.
Most cities are very kind to the rich, but Bombay is one city which welcomes the poorest of the poor.
Yes, and this is what I found. I found it rather remarkable, you know, and how yesterday's outsiders have become today's insiders, and how the city keeps growing and changing shape and tone. So in that way, a very, very vibrant culture being built up.
You've kind of skimmed on the surface, but not really gone in depth into the politics of it. In fact, you yourself have mentioned that you stayed away from crime, cricket and commerce.
Yes, I wanted to stay away from crime, cricket and commerce. One, because I think there are lots of other books on it. And that is one of the biggest challenges of doing a book on Bombay when there are 100, 200 books on Bombay already.
Innumerable.
Innumerable. That was one reason that I wanted to. But more importantly, it was that, you know, when you're spending your life, say 5 years of it or 3 years of it writing, you want to be true to yourself. You want to be true to the city as you know it. And you have to be true so that your readers know that you're telling the truth. That has to come out. And for me, I think philosophy is of much more interest and draws me much more than politics. So it would be that path one took.
And also this beautiful amalgamation, or looking at Bombay not so much as cyclical in time, but as if various times seem to go hand in hand, and different parts of Bombay seem to be living in different time warps, right from the discovery of the subterranean forest.
Thank you for saying that. I am delighted, yes, because this is a one point that Christopher and I were very keen on when we started the book. We hadn't really planned much else, except that we would explore Bombay as a kind of a river of time or streams of time running through it, you know, with different textures, sometimes fast and sometimes slow. So this quality of time also was very important for Christopher, because as a photographer he needed to arrest the moment. And then of course with the arrested moment you try to go out of the moment to all moments. And for me it was, yes, this sheer magic of this huge city, on the one hand holding this huge urban forest where time seems the same as it was centuries ago, and at other times, you know, moving very rapidly in parts of the new North Bombay, while again you have a place like Buleshwar, which is which has temples, but there is another quality of time. And what does this do to the citizens? That interested me.
Or Banganga for that matter.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, one of the most interesting features of the book is that most of the photographs are in black and white, and they have been photographed with cameras which are as old as time.
Yes, I think they're pretty old cameras, because here again, this is Christopher's philosophy, which I respect deeply, to meditate on the image before taking the photograph. And he found that the earlier cameras, especially the ones on the tripod with silver gelatine prints, that meant you had to set it up, you had to wait for the process to happen, and this gave him time to contemplate and make finer and finer prints. So he was very keen on this, and that is one of the reasons why he used a certain set of cameras, and also the magic of black and white against the realism of color, you know, because we are talking equally of the imagination that is happening in this reality.
And also somewhere it arrests time, do you think? Because it's a black and white picture, it could belong to any era.
Yes, I think that is there, because it immediately, in a sense, black and white is unreal.
Right.
So it's that much further from time, and therefore in that sense from reality, and therefore in that sense a little more abstract already. It has it built up in it, built into it.
You stayed away from the iconic Bombay, although you talk about the little people of Bollywood or the Bombay film industry, or the other people, the real people who are as subterranean as the forest, the prehistoric forest. Now, one of the characters which is very intriguing is the undertaker.
Yes, indeed.
And he said, "This is my passion." It was his 33rd profession and his passion.
Abbas Akhtar.
Abbas Akhtar.
Yes. This is, you know, by happy coincidence, and I owe this to Christopher, because Christopher was trying to cross the street, and this gentleman was wondering whether he needed help, you know, a Firangi, that kind of thing, and they got into a conversation, and Christopher found he was fascinating, and then he called me up and said, "Priya, you're going to love this. Here's an undertaker who is passionate about his work, meet him." And there we went, and sure enough, another world was exposed. And also about other communities, you know. Abbas Akhtar is a Baha'i. And then he spoke about the various rituals of different communities. And again, that was another kind of entry point into the mega palace of Bombay, Mumbai.
And you know, if we carry on with the same theme of death, which really is the basis of all life, this beautiful rain tree that you describe.
Yes, this was, I mean, just the idea of a huge tree growing there, you know. You know how it is when nature is always a little overgrown, you get a sense of peace.
Yes.
Rather than manicured lawns and, you know, twisted little bonsai trees done to perfection. This overgrowth, this gentle kind of rambling. And there was this huge tree. Again, this was Christopher's find in Mazgon. Chinese temple was mine. And I was saying, I want to find Meena Kumari's grave. And he said, you know, I think there's this, that actress you're talking about is buried here. So we trotted off there. And it's a well-kept graveyard, and on her tomb you have these little diyas, lit diyas and flowers, and the scent of petals, of rose petals, and above that this tree like a blessing. It was beautiful.
What is it that you kind of are the most happy to remember or to rediscover in Bombay?
I think I was very moved by the lives of people. And there were so many of them, and they're the people who won't have email IDs, so I can't call them for book launches, you know. But it was just hearing their tales, because hearing their stories gave you, in a sense, a larger picture of India, what is growing where, like the taxi drivers would always tell you, you know, what grows in their hometown. Similarly, you know, you have a much more complex, layered vision of the city, of the country through them, and their various Hindis that come across. You know, so I appreciate it.
In your own poetry in the book, I shall not forget.
Ah, yes.
You, in a way, rediscover, re-explore these various experiences through your own gaze.
True. For many years in my childhood and my teen years, I was very fortunate. My parents' house was next to the sea, and I had my window seat on the ledge there with my books. And so, you know, reading and looking at the sea almost became synonymous. So, you know, when you want to take a break, you look out and there it is. And I think that those years of looking at the sea and reading came back to me when I wrote that.
Why don't you read that to us?
This section which you'd asked me to read is from a section actually called Tides, which is from a larger section called Mosaics of Movement, where I wanted to get the pulse of the city through, say, the major movements that happen in the city. Tide, migrants, the flow of money, and of course traffic. So this particular section is from the first of the sea near my window. I should not forget to mention the high tide as it swelled outside my window. I should not forget how moonlight played on the sea as I woke from my dreams, how it lay gleaming silent as a prayer on dark waves, or how it rode over sapphire depths as I awoke to study from exams or from lovemaking. I should not forget how the moon's shimmer trembled like a film on tides. I should not forget the call of the lone drunk outside my home as he stumbled on rocks and debris at low tide, calling to the moon, calling to himself, calling me back to my solitude. Nor should I forget the sun's expanding reflection over water, its high noon dazzle when it spangled the sea as into a sheet of boiling diamonds, bright as joy that wipes clean, or brilliant as pain. I should not forget the delights of sunset that are different each day, each one splendid, though each is routine, and yet for all of eternity, never to be repeated. Nor should I forget the movement of clouds over the sea, these shape-shifters that deepen the shades of waves as they pass overhead like the weight of memory. Or the one terrifying day when a blanket of storm clouds gathered over the city from the land, hooding the horizon like an omen, perhaps for the city itself. I should not forget my debt to the sea that has stood outside my window for decades and will remain there irrespective of my presence.
Priya, just like the sea kind of invites one to immerse oneself into its depths, so does your book. Thank you so much for sharing emotions with us, and thank you for being on our program.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed myself.
Thank you.
मेरे पास में एक किताब है भूत। इसके रचनाकार हैं भरत ओला, राजस्थानी के प्रख्यात रचनाकार, हिंदी के रचनाकार। ये भूत क्या कहती है?
भूत में 10 कहानियाँ हैं। जो ही हम इस नाम को पढ़ते हैं या सुनते हैं तो हमारे दिमाग में एक भूत का चेहरा उभर के आता है अलग तरह से, जो डरावना है। लेकिन इसमें 10 कथाएँ जो है वो भूत नहीं है, ये मनोवैज्ञानिक कहानियाँ हैं। और भूत जो है वो हमारी कल्पना में है। जैसे बच्चे को माँ डराती है कि बेटा, राजस्थानी में कहा बेटा हाउ खा जाएगो, वो हाउ जो है वो आज तक ना तो उससे कोई मरा, ना उसने कभी कुछ खाया। हमारे अंदर जो हवा बैठा हुआ है भूत का, वो है। 10 की 10 मनोवैज्ञानिक कहानियाँ हैं और इस मनोवैज्ञानिक कहानियों में भूत जो है या तो मानवीय शरारत है या मानसिक रोग है। पहले मैंने एक किताब पढ़ी थी राजस्थानी की, हरमन चौहान की, वो मतलब क्या है, वो रहस्य कथाएं उनको कहते हैं। उसको पढ़ने के बाद में मुझे लगा कि पूरे राजस्थान में जब मैंने ग्रामीण अंचल के लोगों को देखा तो मुझे लगा कि बहुत ज़्यादा अंधविश्वास उनके बीच में है। कहीं घर में किसी चीज़ के कपड़ों की आग लग गई, कुछ चोर हो गया, वो सब चीज़ों को भूत से जोड़ के देखते हैं, जबकि दरअसल ऐसा नहीं है। भूत जो है वो हमारी कल्पना में है और यथार्थ में भूत नाम की कोई चीज़ मुझे नहीं लगता कि कोई चीज़ है।
आप इस भूत कहानी संग्रह से एक कहानी का अंश सुनाएं।
वैसे तो आप देखेंगे तो 2 भाइयों की कथा है जी, और उसको मैं एक अंश आपको पढ़ के सुनाता हूँ। हरपत और ओम 2 भाई है, दोनों ही सीरमाई है। सीरमाई कहीं एक दांतरी थोड़ी टूटे, पर दोनों वारा न्यारा न्यारा स्वभाव और न्यारा न्यारा काम। हरपत खेती खड़ियो है तो ओम अल्लाह टली करणियो। हरपत ने फ़कत और फ़कत आप रे काम सु मतलब कठई इन्ने बिन्ने आवणो नी जावणो नी, बस घर सु खेत और खेत सु घर ताई। बियाई गांव में उन जीव कमती लागे, गांव में करे कहीं ताश खेलनी उन कदे आवे नहीं, गल्ला और गल्ला तो करनी कदे उन जिंदगी में आई नहीं। बात रहा तो 2.5 टप्पा हुए, बस कर लिया और बात ख़त्म। उन रे पछे बे मतलब बाखा झोड़ी तो करना हुए, बात तो कर ली बस। इन से आचो है कि खेत में जाए ने डांगरा सारू नीरणी पाड़ लेवे, खुद ही निनाण काट लेवे कि काम धाम होवे तो ठीक है, नहीं तो हल डांडो ही साम लेवे, सन सामड़ा ठीक रहे। आजकल दिवड़ बहुत आ रही है, तंगड़ा तकात नहीं कौन छोड़े तो पछे हल डांडो ही तो बिसाती कहीं। तो इन तरह हरपत तो हमेशा खेतरों काम करे और ओ भाई ओम हमेशा आपरी चौधरी करे।
भरत जी, ये जो भूत कथा संग्रह है अंश आपने हमको एक सुनाया, इसका हिंदी में हमारे दर्शकों को कुछ अनुवाद बताएं।
हाँ बिल्कुल, ये है कि 2 भाई हैं, एक हरपत है और एक ओम है। हरपत हमेशा जो है वो खेत में काम करता है, उसको घर में रहना बिल्कुल अच्छा नहीं लगता, बात भी उससे कोई ज़्यादा आती नहीं है और वो ये समझता है कि हमेशा खेत में जाने से ही किसान जो है वो ठीक रहता है। और कुछ ना कुछ काम ना भी खेत में हो तो भी वो खेत में इसलिए चला जाता है कि मैं जा कर के थोड़ा बहुत काम कर लूँगा, काम नहीं होगा तो मेरे जो खेती के जो औजार हैं उनकी सार संभाल कर लूँगा। और खेत में जाने से मेरा उनसे फसल से और उनसे सबसे मेरा रागात्मक रिश्ता बना रहेगा। जबकि बड़ा भाई है वो हमेशा किसी भी तरह का कोई काम में विश्वास नहीं करता। वो सारा जो परिश्रम है, सारा जो काम है, वो खेती करने वाला भाई हरपत करता है और ओम उन पैसों से खूब आनंद और मौज मस्ती मनाता है। घर में कोई भी चीज़ अगर आती है तो उस भाई से पूछ करके, जो काम करता है उससे पूछ के नहीं आती है। और यही मनोग्रंथि जब बार बार लोग कहते हैं उसे कि आपके घर में आज गाड़ी आई है, आपके घर में आज नया ट्रैक्टर आया है, आपके घर में आज ये आया है, तो उस खेती करने वाले भाई को इन चीज़ों का कोई पता नहीं होता और लोग उसे हमेशा ताने मारते हैं और आखिर में वो एक जो मनोग्रंथि है उसके अंदर बन जाती है और फिर वो अपने खुद की जो फसल है उस फसल को वो स्वयं ही अपनी कमाई हुई फसल को और एक आक्रोश से भर के उसको वो आग लगा देते हैं।